have a look at this here. So what we see at the top, that's the others dominance, right? How much of all of crypto is currently in the altcoins. And what we see at the bottom, that's the Bitcoin price. Now, the green areas, that shows us when we have altcoin season, right? When the altcoins tend to outperform the rest of the market. We want to be in altcoins during those kinds of times. This is an outperformance of smaller altcoins of 1,700%. And what we see over here, that's an outperformance of the altcoins of roughly 300%. So when was it right to be in the altcoins? When was it a good time to be in the altcoins? When was it a bad time to be in the altcoins? When we look at the Bitcoin price here at the bottom, we can see that Bitcoin has finished a bear market here. It came actually from $2,000. So we don't have the others dominance for the early price data. But Bitcoin had this massive crash, right? The 90% crash. But then it consolidated for roughly a year and it went up by 150% already. So it was quite clear at that point in time that the bear market was over, that we wouldn't fall any further. We've already consolidated for a year. We've appreciated. The massive decline that we saw prior has stopped. So after we have come out of a bear market, then when that bear market reversal was already confirmed after a year, then the altcoins outperformed. So it was another way to go more risk on, to take advantage of the future price rally. When did they stop to outperform? They stopped after the bear market was confirmed. So when we have rallied a lot in Bitcoin and subsequently turned around, and we already by that time crashed by roughly 50%. From the all-time high to the bottom, we already went down from 20K to 10K. Once we had the confirmation that the bull market was over, that's then when subsequently the altcoins sold off. The same is true afterwards, right? When did we get altcoin season? When did the altcoins outperform? It was after the reversal. So we had our bear market, we had our roughly 80% decline in Bitcoin. And then 1 year afterwards, when Bitcoin went from 3.5K up to roughly 10K, 11K, after we have seen that rally, that's when the altcoins outperformed. So there seems to be a delay happening here. When should we again exit the altcoins? It's after the bull market has ended, right? We have gone sideways already for more than a year in Bitcoin. And that's then when the altcoins subsequently went down. We've already come down in Bitcoin by 40% this time, but we went sideways for a longer period. So it seems like we need some kind of confirmation of the current trend for the altcoins to make its moves. When we have come out of a bear market and we've already appreciated in Bitcoin for roughly a year, that's then after the appreciation when the altcoins go up. When do the altcoins start to underperform? It's after when the bull market is over, half a year after that, or maybe 1 year after that, when we start to come down. That's then after that 6 to 12 months when then the altcoins sell off even further. So it seems like there is an interesting delay happening here. But what I also find interesting is have a look at the red boxes over here, because this is where things changed this time. We came out of a bear market, right? We hit the 16K low in Bitcoin and we appreciated. And we appreciated for, again, 6 to 12 months, and we hit the low in others dominance. And as we anticipated, right, we should then outperform with the altcoins. But what's interesting this time around is that the altcoins did not continue to outperform. This is what they used to do in the past, right? As long as the bull market continues, the altcoins should continue to outperform. Not this time though. This time the altcoins suddenly became weak again. And so this might be a structural shift. I have to potentially agree with this. When the situation is ideal, when the setup is ideal, and we are in a not very quick, but we are in a bull market, and the altcoins still cannot outperform well. What does this mean for the future, right? If conditions even worsen, if we enter a bear market, will the altcoins really perform that well? I've got my doubts. I have an explanation why we are here in the reds, why the altcoins aren't outperforming. And that's simply because Bitcoin didn't appreciate quickly enough. Because why do the altcoins outperform? Why is everybody buying altcoins? It tends to be new investors that enter the space. that try to find the next altcoin, right? So let's say Bitcoin has already appreciated. Bitcoin is in a bull run, made a multiple X return. At that point, it's probably already at an all-time high. New people see this, right? They see this in traditional media. They're considering, what should I buy now? Should I buy Bitcoin as well? And then comes the doubts, right? When Bitcoin is already at the all-time high and Bitcoin has historically dropped in bear markets by 60, 70, 80%, when there's so much risk in Bitcoin, maybe I do not want to be the sucker that's late to the party that's buying at the all-time high to then see the price coming crash down. So what tends to happen is that people don't see enough potential reward to buy Bitcoin at those high prices. They do want to enter the space though, because things are going up. And so when that's the case, new people enter the space, and those new people tend to buy the smaller altcoins. They have smaller prices, and smaller prices seem to reflect more potential upside. At least that's the thinking. Many people that enter the space. And so that's probably what went on during old altcoin seasons. This time around though, the Bitcoin appreciation was not quick enough. The Bitcoin appreciation was slower compared to what technology stocks did. It was also slower compared to what gold and silver did. And so all of the attention by the average retail investor, all the attention went to Nvidia stock, all of the attention went to silver. It did not go to Bitcoin. Traditional media was not inclined to talk about Bitcoin's all-time high when Nvidia appreciates much faster, or when silver appreciates much faster. So you probably hear many people that are not in the space, that aren't really trading actively, that aren't thinking about their investments that actively. You probably heard some of those people asking you, when they know that you are in that game, should I buy silver now? They're asking you about silver. They're not asking you about Bitcoin. And so that's simply just a reflection of that. If the crypto market is not appreciating quicker than any other asset class, then we've got a problem. Then the altcoins have a problem. Then the altcoins cannot outperform, because the altcoins, they thrive on new people entering the space. And that's why I think this structure has changed. That's why, even though we came out of a confirmed bear market, we did not see the altcoins appreciate further, but instead they underperformed, simply because there was not enough attention. We can also see this in the number of search queries. Right? So search queries did not hit new all-time highs. During prior bull runs, we saw how search queries for crypto hit new all-time highs. This time it was just the old people coming back. So yeah, I find this quite noteworthy. Have a look at this here. This is the others' dominance. And we could make the argument that in the early days, there was simply adoption of the altcoins. So the altcoins, as a fraction of all of crypto, tended to go up over time. At some point, that adoption has halted. As in, maybe we are now saturated in the market. Maybe now the altcoins just appreciate as quickly, at least in market cap, compared to Bitcoin and Ethereum. Others measures all the altcoins that are not in the top 10, right? So in the early days, we simply saw small altcoins outperform. But then over the last 6-7 years, that outperformance has halted. We can then also draw the following lines. So this is a support line, here's a resistance line. And when we just look at the trading activity since we have been in those two lines, right? If we just take away the initial adoption phase, and then we calculate the average dominance since we've entered that trading range, we get to this dotted line here, roughly 9.75%. So maybe this is the long-term equilibrium now. So maybe the altcoins will now hover between being cheap and being expensive. And currently they might be somewhat cheap. And I think this is interesting. Why is this interesting? It shows us an explanation why recently, in the last few days, we haven't seen the altcoins getting sold off more compared to Bitcoin and Ethereum, right? Crypto in general went down quite a lot, but it was mainly the main cryptocurrencies, the larger cryptocurrencies that sold off. The smaller cryptocurrencies actually did not sell off that much. And probably one of the potential explanations for that is that the altcoins have already been comparatively cheap and that they're now simply just trading in a particular range. And so maybe there is, at least to a degree, a chance that the altcoins, comparatively speaking, at least in terms of market cap, will still hold up relatively well. In terms of prices, of course, they might underperform because because there's token dilution, there's new tokens hitting the market. But just in terms of market cap comparisons, maybe even if Bitcoin and Ethereum continue to sell off, in the very short term, the altcoins could still, comparatively speaking, sell a bit less. So keep that in mind in case you enter relative valuation shorts, in case you bet on falling altcoins, while at the same time betting on a rising Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana price. There is a chance that at least in the short term, the altcoins will not sell off as aggressively. We've also seen this in our relative valuation trade vault. But I found this quite interesting, seeing how there might be a long-term equilibrium for how important the altcoins are within the ecosystem, that we are currently rather low on that. Many altcoins are currently sitting right at their all-time low or key support levels in US dollar valuation. When you're opening a relative trade, do you factor this in? The answer is no, I don't factor this in at all, because a lot of the liquidity for most altcoins is directly tied to the overarching cryptocurrency as well. So let's say you've got a meme coin. Let's say you've got Pepe, for example. Pepe is highly correlated to Ethereum because it's listed on the Ethereum chain. So when Ethereum goes down by 10%, then Pepe will also go down by 10% automatically without a single trade ever happening. And that's because the liquidity on chain is directly matched with Ethereum. In other words, Pepe is actually not valued in US dollars, it's valued in Ethereum. It's the ratio between the number of Pepe tokens in the liquidity pool versus the number of Ethereum tokens in the liquidity pool that's determining the price of Pepe. That's why there's all this correlation. That's why everything goes up and down at the same time. It's simply because the major cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana, they're going up and down based on various reasons, right? Based on ETF demand, based on demand by treasury companies, based on supply by, say, the long-term holders that are selling. So the major cryptocurrencies, they go up and down, and then many altcoins are simply directly tied to the price movements of those major altcoins. So that's true for Pepe versus Ethereum. That's true for, say, the Trump token, the Trump meme coin on Solana. So we see this connection for pretty much any altcoin, because most altcoins are directly tied to a particular ecosystem. And so really, when we see a support in US dollar price charts, it doesn't really mean anything in terms of potential price supports, in terms of potential diminishing sell pressure. I just look at the relative valuations, and I tend to work with this relatively well. It tends to work pretty well. The supports, the resistances work relatively well. We can see how money flows in and out of the altcoin relative to the overarching altcoin. And sometimes this is a bit problematic. Let's say we've got an altcoin that's relatively equally spread in terms of liquidity across several big alts. So let's say we've got an altcoin that's traded versus Solana and versus Ethereum. What should we take as a benchmark? Then I simply just take the others market cap. So look at the price of that altcoin relative to others, and that works quite well as well. But yeah, the US dollar price charts are really not useful. I don't even open them anymore. I don't look at them at all. This clip is coming to an end, but the entire episode is available over here. Just click here. Looking very much forward to seeing you on the other side. Cheers.